Donald Trump is making headlines again with a bold ultimatum to NATO allies. Spend 5% of GDP on defense, more than double the current 2% target, or risk losing US support. This demand, reported by the Financial Times, comes as Russia escalates military spending to 6.3% of GDP and continues its aggression in Ukraine. But why is this happening now, and what does it mean for global security? To understand the stakes, we rewind to 2014. Russia's annexation of Crimea shattered illusions of post-Cold War stability. NATO, caught off guard, scrambled to respond. At a crisis summit in Wales, members pledged to spend 2% of GDP on defense by 2024, a symbolic target to rebuild military readiness and share the financial burden. The US, long NATO's biggest spender, had grown frustrated footing the bill while allies like Germany and Canada lagged. Fast forward to today, 23 of 32 NATO countries now meet the 2% goal, a record high. But Trump's push for 5%, a staggering increase, has sparked outrage and panic. Critics argue it's unrealistic. European democracies would need to slash social programs to fund militaries overnight. Meanwhile, Russia's war machine roars ahead, with Putin pouring resources into drones, tanks, and hybrid warfare. If NATO cracks under US pressure, experts warn, Putin could test the alliance's weakest links, like the Baltic states, knowing Europe lacks America's firepower. The nightmare scenario? A US withdrawal from NATO. Without American troops, jets, and intelligence, Europe's defenses would strain to counter Russia. Smaller nations might seek separate deals with Moscow, fracturing the alliance. China, watching closely, could exploit the chaos to expand its influence. Yet some ask, is NATO even fit for modern threats? Cyber attacks, AI warfare, and space militarization demand new strategies, not just bigger budgets. As tensions rise, the question isn't just about money, it's about trust. Can Europe and America rebuild a fractured partnership? Or will Trump's ultimatum become the final straw in a crumbling alliance? The answer could reshape global security for decades. The elephant in the room: is NATO even relevant anymore? NATO was built for tank battles in Germany, not cyber attacks on power grids or AI-driven disinformation wars. While Europe argues over budgets, Russia and China are pioneering hybrid warfare. Putin doesn't need to invade Estonia. He can crash its banks, hack its elections, and radicalize its Russian minority via TikTok. Meanwhile, China's gray zone tactics in the South China Sea go unanswered. Modernizing NATO isn't just about spending more, it's about spending smarter. Estonia invests heavily in cybersecurity. Its defense minister works from a bunker designed to withstand Russian hacks. Norway focuses on Arctic warfare, anticipating climate-driven resource conflicts. But these niche efforts lack coordination. NATO needs a 21st century playbook. Pooled resources for AI, quantum computing, and space defense. Instead, it's stuck debating whether Belgium needs more F-35s. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give the video a thumbs up. The human cost: guns versus butter. Behind the geopolitics are real people. A 5% defense target would ravage Europe's social fabric. Germany's famed healthcare system? Flashed. France's subsidized childcare? Gone. Spain's renewable energy transition? Delayed. Voters won't tolerate it. Right-wing populists would surge, blaming NATO for austerity. Marine Le Pen in France, the AfD in Germany, and Italy's Meloni would weaponize the backlash, calling for exits from the alliance. Yet there's another side. Ukrainians digging mass graves in Bucha don't care about Germany's pension debates. Baltic families stocking iodine pills for a nuclear attack don't pity France's budget woes. As one Kiev resident told me, "You think war is someone else's problem? Wait until Putin's missiles hit Berlin." The verdict: can NATO survive its midlife crisis? Trump's 5% demand is a mirror, reflecting NATO's existential crisis. The alliance is trapped between a revanchist Russia, a distracted America, and a divided Europe. Compromise is possible. Maybe a tiered system where frontline states, Poland, Baltics, pay 4%, while others ramp up over a decade. Or a NATO 2.0 that pools tech, not tanks. But time is short. Putin's war machine won't wait. China's watching. And Trump's ultimatum, however crude, forces a reckoning. Is NATO a relic of the past or a bridge to a safer future? The answer will define the next century, for better or worse. Trump's 5% gambit. Genius or suicide? Trump's push for 5% isn't just about fairness. It's a calculated provocation. Let's crunch numbers. If Europe met his demand, Germany would need to spend €225 billion annually on defense, up from €72 billion. That's more than the entire GDP of Portugal. France would have to choose between aircraft carriers and pensions. Smaller states like Belgium or Canada would face economic revolt. But here's the twist. Russia is already spending 6.3% of its GDP on defense, a Soviet-level sacrifice that's cratering its economy. Moscow is drafting prisoners, stripping washing machines for microchips, and buying drones from Iran. Putin's regime is all in on war while Europe debates daycare subsidies. Trump's message is brutal but clear. You think Putin cares about your work-life balance? Wake up. Critics call Trump's 5% demand unrealistic, but allies privately admit NATO's current trajectory is unsustainable. A senior EU diplomat recently confessed, if Russia wins in Ukraine, we'll need 3% just to deter Putin from Poland. Trump's 5% is a wake-up call, delivered with a sledgehammer. The US exit scenario: chaos or catharsis. Imagine Trump wins in 2024 and follows through on abandoning NATO. Overnight, Europe's security architecture collapses. The EU's proposed strategic autonomy plan, a paper-thin promise of a joint military, would face reality. France and Germany would clash over nuclear sharing. Eastern Europe, terrified of Putin, might cut unilateral deals with Moscow. Hungary's Orbán would host Russian troops for stability. China would offer security partnerships to desperate Balkan states. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give the video a thumbs up. But here's the irony. A US exit could force Europe to grow up. Poland, already spending 4% of GDP on defense, is building the EU's largest land army. France, with its nuclear arsenal, could lead a coalition of the willing with Britain. The EU's €100 billion defense fund, once stalled by bureaucracy, might finally buy real firepower. As one Baltic official muttered, maybe we need Trump to threaten us. We've been lazy for too long. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give the video a thumbs up. The war has exposed the unpreparedness of several countries for a major conflict, primarily due to insufficient stockpiles. This revelation raises a pressing question. Is the 2% defense spending target still adequate? NATO's Secretary General has emphasized that the 2% benchmark should be seen as a minimum requirement, not a ceiling. In a speech delivered in Brussels, he pointed out that while NATO allies initially agreed to invest at least 2% by 2023, rising global threats from Russia, cyber attacks, and increasing instability demand a much higher commitment. The challenge of increasing defense spending, however, is substantial. It's not merely about purchasing new tanks or aircraft, but also involves training soldiers, maintaining equipment, and building advanced capabilities. Many countries, having underfunded their defense sectors for years, now face a steep uphill battle to catch up. For decades, NATO members shifted their focus away from large-scale stockpiling and mass production of munitions, operating under the belief that large-scale wars were obsolete. However, Russia's artillery-heavy tactics in Ukraine shattered this illusion. By combining traditional artillery strategies with modern technologies like UAVs and precision-guided munitions, Russia has demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of overwhelming firepower. This approach has exposed significant weaknesses within NATO. While NATO prioritizes precision and efficiency, Russia's reliance on massive artillery barrages underscores the importance of maintaining substantial stockpiles. The rapid consumption of munitions, coupled with the destruction of armored vehicles and artillery, has strained NATO's ability to support Ukraine while replenishing its own reserves. One of the key lessons from the conflict is that technological advancements cannot entirely replace the need for sufficient personnel, equipment, and stockpiles to sustain prolonged combat. Western nations, including the UK, have heavily invested in advanced air power and precision technology, often at the expense of artillery and ground forces. In contrast, countries like Russia and China have maintained a focus on sheer numbers. Drones have proven essential for reconnaissance and targeted strikes in Ukraine. The Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 drones initially achieved significant success, disrupting Russian convoys and supply lines. However, their effectiveness diminished as Russia deployed advanced air defenses such as the S-300 and S-400 systems and employed electronic jamming techniques. Smaller, expendable drones have been valuable for reconnaissance but are limited by payload capacity and vulnerability to countermeasures. The challenges faced by traditional air forces in Ukraine highlight the shifting dynamics of modern warfare. Advanced ground-based air defenses have forced aircraft to operate far from the battlefield, limiting their effectiveness. Even helicopters, once critical for mobility and casualty evacuation, have been largely sidelined due to their vulnerability. Despite these obstacles, Ukraine has demonstrated remarkable adaptability. With limited resources, it has countered Russian tactics and embraced NATO's doctrines of maneuver warfare and strategic flexibility. This resilience has come at a great cost, underscoring the importance of sustained international support. Since the start of the war, Ukraine has received substantial aid from NATO members and other countries, totaling at least €75.2 billion between January and November 2022, according to the Kiel Institute for the World Economy. The United States has contributed the most, committing €47.8 billion, €22.9 billion for military supplies. The UK and Germany have followed with €7.1 billion and €5.4 billion, respectively. Non-NATO nations such as Sweden and Finland have also made significant contributions. Modern weapons like Leopard 2 tanks and NASAMS air defense systems have played a critical role in Ukraine's defense. However, Ukrainian officials, including Ambassador Oksana Markarova, have repeatedly warned that the country is running dangerously low on weapons and ammunition. The U.S. is considering a $95 billion emergency aid package, with $60 billion allocated for military supplies, but even this may not be sufficient. Nations like the Czech Republic and Canada have pledged to send additional artillery rounds, but these efforts still fall short of Ukraine's needs. General Ben Hodges, a former U.S. military leader in Europe, warned that delays in aid have emboldened Russian forces. According to him, Russian forces have recognized Ukraine's diminishing artillery fire and are increasing their pressure on multiple fronts. Donald Trump has been one of the most vocal figures demanding NATO reform. Even before his presidency, he called NATO obsolete and questioned the U.S.'s commitment to defending allies that did not meet their defense spending obligations. In 2018, Trump made headlines by urging NATO members to double their defense spending target from 2% to 4% of GDP. He criticized nations like Germany and Canada for falling short while arguing that the U.S. was shouldering an unfair share of NATO's costs. Trump's push highlighted a broader debate about NATO's future and its members' willingness to invest in their collective defense. With rising threats and evolving challenges, the alliance faces a pivotal moment. The lessons from Ukraine are clear. Maintaining peace and stability requires more than just technological superiority. It demands sustained investments in defense and a renewed focus on readiness for prolonged conflicts. Germany has long been criticized for not contributing enough to NATO, despite being one of its primary beneficiaries. Former President Donald Trump highlighted this issue, pointing out that Germany's benefits from the alliance far outweigh those of the United States. His criticisms were not solely about NATO's finances but were part of his broader America First foreign policy. Trump argued that allies should take on greater responsibility for their own security, allowing the U.S. to prioritize its own national interests. Trump's stance generated significant tension within NATO but also prompted action. By 2019, more NATO countries had begun increasing their defense budgets, with several making plans to meet the 2% GDP target. Fast forward to today, and Trump has returned with an even more ambitious demand. He is calling for NATO members to allocate 5% of their GDP to defense spending. Why the push for increased spending? According to Trump, it is necessary due to the growing dangers and unpredictability of the world. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has caused immense destruction and demonstrated Moscow's capacity to adapt its military strategies, even after initial setbacks. By focusing on gradually wearing down Ukrainian forces, Russia has raised concerns about how long Western nations can sustain their support for Ukraine without facing domestic political and economic pressures. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, the conflict in Gaza continues to create significant challenges. Israel's efforts to rescue hostages and defeat Hamas have revealed tensions between its military and political objectives. Experts warn that even if Israel achieves its immediate goals, a power vacuum in Gaza could enable smaller factions or other nations to seize control, leading to further instability. Regional powers such as Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE are being asked to mediate, while global organizations like the United Nations are losing influence. In the Red Sea, attacks on ships by Iran-backed Houthi rebels threaten critical global trade routes and increase the risk of broader conflicts. Beyond conventional warfare, Russia poses a quieter but equally serious threat through cyber attacks and intelligence operations targeting NATO members. These less visible tactics are just as dangerous and underscore the need for NATO to be prepared for a wide variety of threats. These challenges highlight the necessity for NATO to evolve. The alliance must be capable of addressing both traditional threats, such as warfare, and emerging dangers, including cyber attacks. Achieving this requires not just more funding but also smarter, more adaptable strategies. Trump maintains that significantly higher defense spending by NATO members is essential for the alliance to become more self-reliant and less dependent on the United States. Trump's push for a 5% defense spending target reflects his belief in a more balanced alliance. He has frequently suggested that if NATO members fail to meet his demands, the US might reconsider its role in the alliance or even withdraw entirely. Such a move would have profound implications. If the US were to leave NATO, the alliance would face a massive challenge in terms of both finances and military strength. The United States currently accounts for approximately 70% of NATO's total defense spending, contributing around $36 billion annually to European security. This includes the deployment of over 70,000 active-duty personnel in Europe and funding initiatives such as the European Deterrence Initiative, which grew from $789 million in 2016 to $6.53 billion by 2019. Beyond financial contributions, NATO heavily relies on the US for its unparalleled military capabilities, including nuclear deterrence and the rapid deployment of reinforcements during crises. The loss of the United States as a member would fundamentally alter NATO's structure and effectiveness, forcing the remaining members to grapple with the question of whether the alliance could survive without its most powerful member.